Good evening. This is Real Talk, History as a Weapon for Black Liberation, and I'm your host, Dr. Sundiata Kaita Chajua. Our guest today is Dr. Eric Jackson. Dr. Jackson holds a BS from Ball State University, a master's degree from the University of Cincinnati, as well as an educational doctorate from the University of Cincinnati. He is a professor of history and associate dean in the College of Arts and Sciences at Northern Kentucky University, and he has nearly 30 years in the academic grind. Dr. Eric Jackson has taught numerous classes in the fields of American and African American history, race relations, and peace studies. Dr. Jackson has also published a wide array of books, book reviews, articles in local, regional, national, and international journals, such as the Journal of African American History, such as the Journal of Negro Education, Ohio History, the International Journal of World Peace, and the Journal of Pan African Studies, of which he serves as the interim editor. With over 50 publications, Dr. Jackson recently completed an online book, African Americans in Cincinnati, and I may be wrong, but I think this is his major work, and that is An Introduction to Black Studies. He was awarded the 2017 Second International World Civility Award by the I Change Nations organization. He is a member of the Library Board of Trustees and the Kentucky Humanities Council and the Cincinnati Preservation Association. Dr. Jackson is an avid fan of baseball, particularly in person. He is very enthusiastic about the Cincinnati Reds, and we're going to have to discuss this. The Chicago White Sox. Um, and he has taught the history of baseball as an academic subject. Let us welcome Brother Eric Jackson. Dr. Jackson, it's a pleasure
Thank
to
you.
have you
Thank
here
you.
with me today.
Thank you
So
for inviting me.
on Real Talk, we try to be informal. So we lose the titles and we speak in terms of first names and brothers and
Yep.
sisters. All right. Um, Now, what I want us to do is try and have more of a conversation than just a straight Q&A. Um, I want you to be comprehensive but succinct. Um, as a way of warning, my my style is to interrupt for clarification or to prod you to go deeper or to make a challenge, either an empirical or a theoretical challenge to what you're saying. But, but it's all friendly, but, we need to be clear. So now I always begin with biological questions because I think that, you kind of need to get to know who the guest is, where they come from, what they're about. And I follow the psychologist William Bill Cross, his negrescence theory, which is sometimes referred to as the Negro to Black conversion process. But it's the cross Black identity development scale is what we're really talking about. So let me get to the first set of questions. So, where are you from?
Originally from Gary, Indiana. Born in
Oh,
1965 in Gary, Indiana.
okay.
So, yeah.
Now, okay, that's an important place. You're from Gary. So here's what I want you to do then. Talk about your formative years, and what I'm interested in is that historical period that you're born into, and your formative years, particularly 11 to 18. Talk about how the time, the place,
Mhm.
and your class background intersected to influence
Yeah.
your later intellectual and social engagement decisions.
So, like I said, I was born in Gary, Indiana. My dad was a steel worker, so his background influenced me in the labor movement, particularly for people of color. So, understanding the plight of black laborers. He was originally from Mississippi, and my mom was originally from Mississippi also. So they traveled north with the Great Migration, but they were laborers. My mom took one college course. My dad had an eighth grade education. I think the first political event I attended was in 1972, and I think it was the National Black Political Convention, where
Yes,
people
yes.
such as at that time, Leroy Jones, Amiri Baraka was there. A lot of black nationalists were there, and it was a situation. I think I was 7 at that time that I was kind of trying to figure that out. Um,
Yeah, it sounded like you would have
the,
been 7.
yeah, but I still remember that at 7 trying to figure out the political landscape from a Richard Hatcher became mayor in 68, I think. Yeah, he was 68 to 88.
Mhm.
Yeah, that 28, 20, yeah, 68 to 88. Um, but at the same time, those nationalist tendencies with that working class uh, trajectory, and even at 7 years old, I was trying to figure out how to navigate these different tentacles and different landscapes and different factors of
Mm.
what exactly the black identity meant during the 70s, and just trying to figure that out as a child, and then growing up in Gary, that taught you about the power of your culture, although it's way past
Elaborate,
integration.
elaborate on that.
Be-
Elaborate on that.
the issue, the point I'm trying to make here is that you didn't have to figure out what your culture was about necessarily with integration with Brown and Brown 2, Brown in 54 and Brown 2 and
Mhm.
55. You knew your culture. You were a black person in a black town with black politicians and black political leaders and black laborers. So you knew your blackness from your birth, and you knew the strength of your
Mhm.
blackness. So those formative years were important to understand who you are as a person of color, a person of African descent as a child. And nobody necessarily had to teach you that because you felt it. You grew up with it. It was embedded in the culture. You could dream it. You could smell it. You knew what that was, as opposed to somebody who was in the suburbs and you integrated and you're kind of lost in as a person of color. Like, what does that mean? I knew what that meant. That meant that I came from
Mhm.
people who were in charge, people who were fighters, people who were labor leaders, people who understand how to negotiate different tendencies from integration to nationalism to self identity to all of that stuff I knew as a kid. Not that I knew it all, but I was empowered with that stuff as a child. And
Mhm.
so from that point on, I ended up going to obviously all African American black schools. Gary Roosevelt at that time was one of the top schools academically and sports wise. Played in a band. I was one of the in a smart kid group. I took all the higher echelon courses in math and calculus and physics, computer science. Played in a band. Music was a key for me to understand the reality because I knew from the background in the church, and I knew that music, particularly the drums, meant something else. It just wasn't an instrument. It had like a rhythm
Mm.
that was a heartbeat. Like all of that stuff was embedded in me as a child, and
So
and
let me
so
let me
that
ask you this question in that regard. Did they teach African American history, African American literature Black studies in the high schools?
Yes, sure did.
Okay.
Absolutely. They didn't call it that. They just talked about Black inventors, Black leaders. We had a Black mayor. Like, you could point to these people. 30 minutes from Chicago, you had the Nation of Islam there. So they would talk about the nation. So yes, they were just, but it wasn't called Black history. It was who you were from the beginning. So yeah, I knew that as a child. And I think that's important to understand as you grow through different stages, because that foundational piece from a
Mm-hmm.
child to a teenager to an early adult, if you have that foundational piece, it helps you navigate once you get out of that and move into, I don't know if you want to call it integration of a larger world. And you're not in, it's sort of a cocoon, but it's a cocoon intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and culturally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. That makes perfect sense. So, what formative experiences made you decide, A, I want to be an intellectual, B, the subject of what I'm going to study, write, and teach about is going to be African American history, Black slash Africana studies?
Uh, that background, understanding the power of those Black folks, wanting to know more about them, wanting to know where they came from, where they got their intellectual values, why they were so strong despite the circumstances. I mean, I remember as a kid when King was assassinated. I remember again that political 1972 political event. Like, where did Leroy Jones and Mary Barack, where did he come from? Like, he just didn't fall out of the sky. Like, he had a history.
Right.
Like, why did he change his name? And what did that mean? And why is that important? And so from that point on, trying to investigate, I guess that intellectual spirit came as a kid, wanting to know. I want to know. I want to learn. I want to know what folks are doing. So it wasn't just kind of floating through the world, just someone was happy go lucky, but I always was this discovery kind of kid. It's like, okay, what makes people tick? What makes them make us
So,
different decisions?
let me try another way to get at something. You know, the first assignment students do in my classes, every class, and every class that I've taught since 92, okay, is they write what I call an autobiographical narrative. But it's really a piece where I'm asking them to talk about how they came to understand race slash nationality, ethnicity, class, and gender. And so I'm looking for them to talk about critical incidents. And the question isn't, you know, we're born into a family, we're born into a neighborhood, into a city, and there's varying degrees of blackness, right?
Yep.
And that's like drinking mother's milk. That's absorbed through the atmosphere. So that's
Yep.
not what I'm trying to get at. What I'm trying to get at is the contestation, right? So that you come to understand that being black means something in this society, and what it means in this society is
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to play a constricted and exploited role in the political economy. We're
Yep.
going to be very limited in the polity. We're going to be excluded in the society, and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
be degraded in the broader culture, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
did you
Yep.
come to understand that being black meant to be oppressed, colonized, what the liberals call second class citizenship? When did that kick in that you are in a contentious, oppressive relationship to the Euro American powers that be?
I think it kicked in understanding the labor movement, understanding U.S. Steel functioning with exploiting Black
Mm.
laborers. But that was a balance with
So, but how did you come to
the other
understand
piece.
that?
Just following
How did you come
my
to understand it? 'Cause go ahead.
understanding my dad's plight as a labor leader, understanding him going to the steel mills every day, him him um being part of the union, but not the leadership. Him, I mean, just driving into Gary and going into quote tours of the steel mill and smelling the soot and understanding the manifestation of the harshness it does to one's body, particularly black folks. Of of
Mm.
of of I mean, just to be blunt, 2 years after my dad retired from U.S. Steel, he died. And one of the reasons he's died was because he was working in a steel mill for 40 years. And they said, just doing an autopsy on his lungs, they were almost black. So understanding that exploitation very clearly,
Yeah.
that was the
That
turning
that
point.
okay. That would do it. That would
Yeah.
absolutely do it. Man, my father also worked in a foundry, and I worked in a foundry for 2 weeks. And I have to tell you, literally, there was this 75-pound cart that they pour with molten steel, and I had to push it down this rail and then dump it, right?
Yep.
And the soot was in the air in such a way that I literally I could reach out and touch this stuff in the air, and I
Yep.
had to part it so I could see. You know what I mean? That
Yep.
kind of phenomena, right? It encouraged me to go back to school.
Me too. That's one of the reasons. I mean, I had to. It's like I can't live this life. There's no way. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
just seeing the orange sky. It wasn't orange sun sky. It was orange soot sky. Like
yeah.
you're breathing this stuff.
That's right. Yeah,
So
yeah. That,
that's what's the turning point of like exploitation. Quick as a kid, which is a balancing act with the political landscape of the nation or Amiri
mhm.
Baraka or Richard Hatch. It's like balancing these two different, and it's not that black culture is just that two dichotomies. I mean, there's all others in between, but that's what I remember
Right.
as a kid, the two dichotomies I had.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I want to switch up a bit um, and ask you some questions about where you teach, right? You're at Northern Kentucky University, and it's located in Highland Heights, Kentucky. So I was looking at some demographics that I find interesting. Right. Most colleges and universities are in small rural towns, but I think people have a tendency to think about the University of Chicago, New York University, Columbia, right? And they think
Right.
about places in these large urban spaces, UCLA, USC, or they think about places in these small urban places like Cambridge, right?
Right.
Boston, etc. But most universities are in very small, all white spaces. So where you are, as I was looking up the data, 90% of the people in uh, Boone County
Correct.
are white, 5%
Right.
are black. Excuse me, 90% of the people in Highland Heights
Heights.
are white, 5% are black, and then in the larger county, Boone County, I presume is named after the criminal Daniel, right?
Correct.
The Indian massacre, the
Yep.
slave
Correct.
holding
Yep.
racist
Yep.
bigots, that
Yep.
asshole.
Yep.
Is 95% white, and again, the black population is only 5%. And what I'm struck by is that Northern Kentucky University is one of the very, very, very few institutions of higher education where the black student population at the university is greater than the percentage of black people in the state.
Correct.
So your campus is 10% black. And by
Correct.
way of comparison, right, the 56,000 undergraduate students at the University of Illinois, I think there's another 7,000 graduate students, but the 56,000 undergrads they're 4.9% black. The state is nearly 15% black. So it's less than a third of the percentage of the state. But you guys are, well, the state is 7% black, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me about that. How did y'all end up with a higher percentage of black folk than in the state, and certainly much higher than them spaces, that surround the university?
Well, probably the two main reasons are that Highland Heights is 15 minutes away from downtown Cincinnati.
Oh,
And
but you got to cross the river.
correct.
Okay.
So the recruitment of students just across the river is pretty easy. And so that's one of the keys. So if you recruit folks to come across the river with a cheaper tuition, even with crossing state lines, your numbers jump. And then the other piece has to do with questioning some of the census numbers, because particularly in the past 5 to 7 years, the number of undocumented or not counted people of color have grown, especially Africans, Nigerians specifically, folks from the DRC and South Africa also are our international populations have grown at the university. And so trying to document, those are not in those numbers, particularly in Boone, Kenton, or Campbell County. It's hard to find those numbers because they don't want to be counted for obvious reasons.
Right.
And so
Okay,
that kind of plays a role in those numbers.
Okay. So yeah, I had forgot about how close you are to Cincinnati, which is
Yep.
one hell of a place.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that there are a few decades, only a couple of decades in the 20th century in which black folks in Cincinnati didn't burn the town down. Right? I mean,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
and that's not
There's
counting the times the white people burned it down trying to kill
exactly.
us.
Exactly.
Cincinnati got a hell of a history.
Hey,
Yeah,
but they still have black folks there.
That's right. They still do.
So
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Okay.
that accounts for those kind of skewed numbers at Northern Kentucky University. But that's not to say
about the
that's
reach
not.
out. What about
This,
the
this,
reach out? I mean, is there a conscious part where you guys
yes,
are going
yes,
out and grabbing those folks?
yes, absolutely, yeah. Particularly black faculty and staff. I mean, our Black Faculty and Staff Association, which I've been a member of, I was a president of for years, and now I'm kind of rolling out of that role as the parliamentarian. I'm kind of in and out, but I intentionally go on recruitment trips. But on those trips, I do tell students the reality is you're still going to a PWI. I mean, the numbers may be skewed, but it's still PWI, which means all its manifestations of white supremacy and segregation is there. It's not like you're escaping this stuff.
To fight with, though.
Yeah,
you got you got colleagues to fight with.
Exactly.
Yeah, that matters.
So I'm not sugarcoating none of this stuff. I mean, because indeed, the history of Kentucky indeed was an enslavement state. So that history has not changed. It is what it is.
That's right. And so I think a lot of people don't understand how this stuff is so embedded.
Yep.
My wife, who's a psychologist, she would say, and I came to, and I realized it too. At one point, we taught in Missouri together, right? But then I left and went to Penn State, which is a whole different story, right? My most unhappy time was in Happy Valley, but and so I ended up back at Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, before we both came to University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. So we would cross that river, right? And literally, when you were going from Illinois into Missouri, you would feel this heaviness. And when you went the other way, it would lighten up. That deep-seated racial oppression. I mean, it was almost like a thing, a living thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I mean, because my wife and I talk about it when we leave the country. We have to get out of the country at least twice a year. And the first time I went to Kenya, and her second or third time, it was like this big. It just lifted off of you this whole thing
Yeah,
as American citizens. It's like, oh, this is how it feels. And trying to explain that to other
yeah,
people is like, no, you got to go. You got to go
yeah.
experience it. You can't explain that. It just
That's right.
lifts off of you going, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's no doubt. The various places I've been in Africa, you,
As soon as you hit the ground, it's like, woof.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like somebody sucked out some heavy goop that was
Yep.
in you. Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
I'm not in the racist United States. It's like, really? Is that how it feels to be liberated for a second? Does that how it feels to be in the majority? Like
right.
that's how it feels.
Yeah, yeah. And even with all the ravages of neocolonialism and
Yep.
capitalism,
Yep.
you still feel better.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And the food is better because it's not processed. But okay,
Exactly.
let us get back. I want to
Yeah,
ask you about.
it's all true though.
I know it is all true, and it's all important. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
your
because my next trip
Go
is with a
ahead,
buddy
go
of
ahead.
mine who lives in London, who's originally from Zambia. I want to go to Zambia just because I've never
Yeah.
been there. So we're planning a trip to Zambia in the next 9 months.
Okay, good, good, good. I've been to South Africa many times, but
Oh
I've never
wow,
been to Zambia. But yeah, yeah, we actually went the summer after they got independence. And
wow,
man, you're talking about a heady place in terms of what was
wow,
going on and all the things you could get involved in and see and enjoy. Wonderful, wonderful.
wow. I
So
mean
I
that
want
and
to
and
switch up.
that and
Go
that
go
is
ahead,
another.
go ahead.
But that is another reason why we live in Boone County, which is interesting. The Cincinnati airport is in northern Kentucky, and we live 15
Wow.
minutes away from the airport. So I can get an Uber and get to the airport and be anywhere in the world. And that was done intentionally. Get me on a plane so I can get out of here.
Yeah,
I will
yeah.
fly
Okay, so
anywhere in
now
the world.
that is very different than most universities that are in
Yep.
small towns. You guys got a big international airport, so I hear
Yep.
you. Envy is coming. Do you feel my envy?
Yep.
Okay.
Get me out of
So,
here. I'm sorry. I'm just taking you on left field. But go ahead.
well, so you recently released a textbook in Black Africana Studies,
Right.
and I want you to discuss. The textbook is an
Introduction to
introduction
Black
to
America.
African American Studies. Okay,
Yep.
so can you discuss the organization,
Yep.
the structure, and scope? By what I mean is this: what's the structure of the book, the chapters, its layout? What are you talking
Hmm.
about? And then I want to know
Hmm.
scope. And by scope,
Okay.
is this a textbook that we would say takes a national approach? That is to say, it looks at African Americans within the U.S. nation state, but we know the U.S. is really an empire. But
Right. Right. Right.
does it take a regional or diasporan approach? Does it take a global African approach? And then in terms of the paradigms, is it Afroecology, Afrocentric? Is it critical race theory? Is it radical Black tradition? Is it Black feminist womanist? Is it a liberal Henry Louis Gates type interpretation? Is it all of that? I know I'm just messing with you now, but but what's the
Okay.
dominant
Okay.
thing? What
I'm.
you
I'm. A,
doing, man?
if I get to it or don't get to it, kind of redirect me. I'm gonna give you the broad strokes of number one, why I wrote the textbook, and then I'll get into that stuff. So,
Okay.
when I received my doctorate from the University of Cincinnati, I was taking classes before I received my PhD in the what are their department called now? I think they're Africana studies. There was something else before. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that's how I got engaged in it as more as an intellectual, because I was taking some of those courses and teaching some of those courses. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite courses I took from Pat Hill Collins on Black feminist theory as
Ah,
the only
yes,
as
yes.
the only guy in the course, which is a whole other discussion, which has
Wow.
its whole different dynamics. But Pat Hill Collins and I became friends, and I can still call her today and her husband, who was at the University of Cincinnati. He just retired like 5 years ago, maybe. But anyway, so I got into it that way from an intellectual standpoint, in addition to my background. But then when
Mm-hmm.
I got a part-time position at Northern Kentucky University, the only books I could find were more focused for graduates. The Karinga piece and even the
Yeah.
Anderson piece was a little too sophisticated for first and second year students, and even the general public. It was good stuff. I mean, I knew it. I could eat
Yeah.
that stuff up. It was fine for me and grad
But
students
I
who
but I hear
were
you.
first
The
years, and so
18-year-old, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and so I was piecemealing stuff together for maybe 10 years. So I'll take a little bit of this, a little of that, try to figure this stuff out. And then it just dawned on me and said, forget that. I'll just write one myself and see how that works. So I conceptualized all the things I was putting together, and from a
And see, what
baseline,
what I think is interesting, you froze.
yeah,
So there's something I didn't hear. You after you
oh,
said, "I'll just write one myself." What was
yeah.
your next point?
There's a baseline of information that I want my students to have, and it wasn't the Karinga's argument, because they couldn't digest that. It was a baseline of understanding the seven or eight major disciplines in Black studies as quickly
And,
as
and
possible, but with student learning outcomes to make sure that they understood that each chapter, um, there's like 14 or 15 different chapters, but some of them are dual chapters. Like there's a chapter on Black feminist theory. There's a chapter on African and Black religion and the Black church. There's a Black sociology, Black psychology, uh, Black Americans in the arts, performing arts, and there's an international chapter, but it's not a thematic kind of piece that gives people an understanding of Pan-Africanism. It's just a baseline information of, if you pick up this book and have no knowledge of Black studies, you will know something. And it may direct you into Karinga. It may direct you into Anderson. It may direct you into cross stuff. So it doesn't have any sort of political, it's a basic, quick. Most chapters are
but
maybe,
you're doing a 360. You're trying to teach them
yeah,
a
right,
little bit of everything, give them a rounded
correct,
view. Okay, got
correct,
it. Got it.
correct. But there's no. I mean, I didn't conceptualize that book, which I could have, with a specific paradigm. I didn't want to do that because I could find that stuff. I wanted just a
Okay,
basic
okay.
person on the street. I see this book on Introduction to Black Studies, pull it off the shelf, flip through it. Okay, I can find the basic 8 disciplines of Black studies. I can have a
Let's
general
see. Okay,
understanding of them. That's it. And I did that intentionally
okay,
because I couldn't
okay.
find anything.
Because now I'm getting what you're saying, but you are teaching them Black studies as a discipline, and here are the subfields in
Correct.
this discipline. Okay,
Correct.
got it.
Correct. So
So
did I
let's,
answer some of your questions?
yeah, you did.
Okay.
You,
Okay.
you you
Okay.
got to it. Now
The
I
long
had
way around, as my
the
students say.
misfortune of, and I think you might have answered it, because my next question was, how is your textbook similar and dissimilar from Stewart and Anderson's Introduction to African American Studies, Marlana's Introduction
Yeah.
to Black Studies,
Yep.
Nathaniel Norman's
Yep.
Jeanette Davison's. And so you kind of answered that. But if you have anything else you want to say, feel free.
No, I mean it is what it is. It's a basic textbook. It just gives you the basics of Black studies. Ooh.
So here's a question. You know, I don't know how to read this, but the tagline on your book is "No AP class required." Why that tagline? Because I mean, we're in a charged political environment. Now, you and I are members of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History Executive
Yep.
Council, and
Yep.
we issued a statement
Yep.
denouncing, right?
Yep.
Denouncing the AP course
Yep.
of the College Board, right?
Yep.
And then you publish a book that's that the main advertisement is no AP course required. What does that mean?
Yep.
And why did you do that? What does that mean?
It's totally marketing. It's totally marketing.
Okay.
I think you're frozen. Ooh,
Yeah, you froze. I don't think I
I
did.
froze. Yeah, you froze. In my
Yeah.
box, you're frozen.
Oh, I
Somehow.
froze too? Okay.
Yeah, you froze.
Um,
Ooh.
so what
So it's
is
totally marketing. It's totally
but you
marketing
still
because
chose it, but
sure.
why? Because
It's
I mean, for some people it's a jab. For
I
other
know
people, it's okay.
exactly. It's totally marketing. It's that plain and simple. It's like I can be in both worlds of I can be for it or I can be against the AP course. I know the curriculum because I've looked at it and I was a part of it at one point, and now I'm kind of waffling on some
Yeah.
stuff because I've reread it and it's like, okay, everybody's got a political thing here, and AP is about making money. I mean, we know that you're in a capitalist structure, so let's not
They stand
pretend.
to make a
Let's
lot of
not
money.
pretend. Let's not pretend money's not a factor. So to make money, you have to placate to certain entities, and which is fine. Just say that then. That's what we're doing. We're not trying to rock the boat enough because we still got to make some money. Just say that then. I'm cool with what you're doing. Just say that. And so I
So let me ask you
was playing both sides of the
Go ahead.
stick. I was playing
Okay.
both sides of it because I can dip in that AP world and critique it and say, you need to do this, this, and this. But at the same time, you don't need to take the course. You can buy the book and I'll give you the same information, even better.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I get that in the world of marketing, but I do think that there's an intellectual and academic interpretation that is there, and we have to
That's
deal with
interesting.
it, right?
That's interesting.
And
Yeah.
and that is, um, if you were the chair of a Black Studies department
Mhm.
and a student took that AP course as currently designed,
Mhm.
would you say they don't need to take the intro course that you designed at your college?
And I don't even know
Would you give them
because
credit?
I don't
Would you
know.
give them college
I
credit?
don't know. But here, I'm going to be as honest as I can. And I'm saying I don't know because of the station I am in currently. As an administrator, probably no, because of the content, but more importantly, the financial piece. Because
Mm,
people don't understand that universities are trying to make money too. So the more
yeah.
courses you don't take at that particular university, the less money you're making off of people. So that's
See, you're the
the
first person I
administrator
heard
thing.
say that.
Yeah.
You're the first person I've heard say that because
Really?
obviously, yeah, most
Oh,
people
watch.
don't want to be honest. When
This
I
is year
you get
year
we get
31.
a
What do I got to lose?
well when I
I'm a
chaired.
full professor on my other side of my career. I got nothing to lose.
I hear you, but do you think? Look, I'm gonna tell you something about folk, man. At least my experience, right? I once had a colleague who he was silent in all other departmental meetings, right? Even when they talking about us, he's silent, right? And so I talked to him one day, and he told me, he said, "I'm waiting till I get tenure. When I get tenure, I'm gonna burn this shit up." So Negro got tenure, and what did he say? "I'm waiting till I become a full professor."
Yeah, just a
And
waiting
so,
game.
yeah, either you're a fighter or you're not, right?
Yeah,
You put on the gloves or you don't put
that's
on the
funny.
gloves.
Yep, it's about
But
making money. I mean, it's capitalism. I mean, people people are confused about capitalism, and I'm not critiquing it as a Marxist or even a socialist. I'm critiquing it as capitalism has nothing to do with ethics. Capitalism is about making as much profit margin as you can, as best you can, and exploiting people if you can get away with it. It has nothing to do with
yeah,
ethics. And people want to
right.
equate capitalism based on other economic structures. We're more ethical. No, you're not. It's
No,
a
you're less
system that
ethical.
feeds on itself about making as much profit, and people are nothing. They're objects to be manipulated. But that's just me.
Okay, but so I want
Even
to
at a
take your
university.
administrative hat off. I
Okay.
want to take your administrative hat
Okay.
off and
Uh-huh.
make you
Black studies
instructor,
director. Okay.
Black Studies director. Do
And which I
you
was for a time.
give students credit? Yeah, I know. Would you give
Mm.
academic credit for that AP course, meaning that they don't have to take the course that your department offers? Would
As
you
Black
waive them
studies
all?
director,
Good
nope.
course. Go
Nope.
ahead.
Nope. As
You
Black
wouldn't.
studies director, nope. Nope.
Okay, why not? And I suspect that it might crisscross with your administrative head, but it's
Exactly.
also a set of very different. There's some other things besides
Well,
the
I think the course is
administrative
watered
position.
down. The course is watered down, and it's not really capturing the 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 conceptualization, the content, the real essence of Black studies. It doesn't capture it. Even the thematic approaches that it takes, it doesn't even touch. Even my mild introduction to Black studies does a better job than that course. And it doesn't even take
Oh,
us. And so, no, I wouldn't do it because the content is not there. And
yeah,
I mean, I could go
yeah.
on and on. It's just the content, the structure, how it's set up. And I had that conversation when they're developing courses. Like you can't do it this way. Call it history. It's not
Well,
Black
that's what it
studies.
is. It's
I
a poorly
know.
designed
Yes.
history course with all the life sucked out of it, but it has
Correct.
nothing to do with Black studies. Not one
No.
damn thing to do with Black studies. It's a piss poor third grade history course.
But it's
Yes.
making money for people. It's part of
Yeah.
the
Oh, it's
political
gonna make a lot of
economy,
money.
economic economy.
They've got 1,700
Mhm.
schools that have signed up
Yep,
right now for the
I know.
pilot, and they're getting $300 per school that signs up for the class, plus another $100 per the students who take the exam. I mean, it's a cash cow,
Of course.
and it's only going to grow. And yet, those kids will come out thinking that they took a Black Studies course. What they took was a disjointed, unorganized history course, because as a history course, it's not chronological,
Nope.
right? It's
Nope.
thematic, and you can get in a theme and talk about something that happened in the 19th century, but you were just doing a theme in the 21st century. It's crazy.
Uh, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an
Okay.
interesting
So,
the
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'll not to shoot the whole process. My question, the alternative argument would be, how do we get folks in the community to understand the importance of Black studies without taking a course? That aside from creating freedom, aside from creating freedom schools, as we talked about in EC, but that's a whole nother discussion. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of stuck on that one. I don't know.
But it's clear to me. Did you ever read Lerone Bennett's The Challenge of Blackness, that set of essays?
I used to use it in class.
Yeah, good. There's a one Black History / Black Power, and Bennett throws out this amazing observation, right? He says that historically, any moment in which Black people are actively studying their history, that moment coincides with a moment in which they are actively struggling harder for liberation. That studying and knowing our history and fighting for liberation, that they are commingled, that there's a dialectical relationship between them. And so, what you say, how do we get this in the community in a way in which the average working class Black person can get into it? Yeah, that is the question.
Well, I think that
how are we going to do that?
And particularly the essence, if people really understand the origins of the Black Studies movement, is that the some of the founding members, the goal was to take the intellectual rigor into the community to solve problems in the community, which is not mentioned in the course. It's like, I don't understand. I don't understand.
Yeah, you do.
I mean,
yeah, you do.
Okay, you got me on that.
The people who see Black studies from that perspective, they don't see it as a problem-solving discipline.
Okay,
right?
I get it.
That then forces them to deal with questions of liberation.
That's true. No,
that's not a concern in terms of what they do.
Well, even when I was posing ideas to those folks and said, okay, you need to equip students who are taking this course with...
You froze. Can you go back and start again? When
I was engaging the very conversations with the creation of the course as an outsider, because they never would put me on an official committee for whatever reason.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's like, okay, how do you empower people in the community with this course? Giving them skills to interpret their own reality based on this course. Like, that's some of the essence of Black studies. And that got kind of X'd out of the conversation for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, again.
Yeah, no.
We don't have to go far
to
understand why that would have gotten X'd out. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
It is what it is.
Yeah. So let me turn to something else that's contemporary. In fact, from yesterday's news, right?
Right.
Florida Board of Governors banned spending in the Florida State University system, which includes 3 schools: the University of Florida, Florida State University, and Florida International University. So I should say 3 schools and their satellites, right?
Yep.
So they are banned from using state funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Wisconsin previously did a similar ban, and the governor, this guy named Kevin Stitt, he used an executive order to do a similar thing in Oklahoma. So it looks like these states are going to outlaw diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And when we were having a discussion about Black student enrollment, we could throw in Black faculty and staff, right?
Yep.
that it's not like these programs have tremendously altered the character of the university, but they have opened up some space, right?
Right.
When I was at the University of Illinois as a graduate student, they had one black faculty member, right? When I graduated, they hired one. I was the only black person in the graduate program, okay? Um, Today, I've got 5 other African American colleagues in the
Mm.
department, right? And the department is smaller than it was when I was a graduate student. And I got 2 African American doctoral students. I had to dump one, so I had 3. And there might be one other black graduate student in the program, right? So there has been a change, but you wouldn't say it's been a robust
Nope.
transformation. So
Nope.
DEI has not made phenomenal reshaping of the university, but it's
Nope.
changed some things around the margins. And now they want to kill this thing that has not been very successful.
Correct. What's your question?
So my question was, do you see this growing beyond the 3 states? Do you feel threatened by it in Kentucky? Should I feel threatened by this initiative in the bluest of blue states, Illinois?
I never feel threatened for
Okay.
whatever reason, but Kentucky is going through the same thing. Their General Assembly just introduced similar bills that's modeled after Florida and uh, part of Texas.
Texas?
So it's coming. My argument that I'm making to our administrators, in a professional way, of course, which they're going to shut it
Right.
down anyway, is that all of this is the vestige of white supremacy in its most obvious way, trying to combat the transformation of the population throughout the country that's moving slowly away from whiteness. And so they're trying to hold on to white supremacy
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible in all its manifestations. It's not just a university thing, it's not just a state thing, it's a country thing. But you don't understand
Mm-hmm.
that if you don't know the history of white supremacy and how it functions in the United States. Or
That's
you
right.
deny that's how it functions from its foundation. So, and I have to figure out how to do that in a professional way.
I know.
and, and not say you've been duped. Whatever course you took on American history, you were duped. Whatever you're listening to now, you're still being duped because this is the foundational piece of this country. White supremacy from the beginning was
Right.
one of the key foundational issues that developed the United States of America and beyond.
Yeah. And that's in part why they don't want African American history taught,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And that's
Exactly.
the essence of that whole piece. But it does raise this question, like one of the things that I feel in a vice about, and that the screws are being tightened. Um, my actual experience with DEI, diversity, equity,
Mhm,
and inclusion, is that this was the vehicle by which the campus administration
mhm,
took money from the vehicles that brought in radical speakers on
mhm.
campus. And they
Yep,
took the money from those spots, right, and departments who did that and centralized it so that they always bring some ho hum Negro liberal, right? They don't bring any more radicals. They don't
nope,
bring the radical faculty. They bring the ho hums, and they control all of the direction, so that DEI actually was the vehicle for shutting down the radicalization
of
of Black
course,
studies, the radicalization of the university.
of
But the right
course.
wing got us thinking that DEI has been
Right,
some powerful
Exactly.
transformative force.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
amazing. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
I
now,
heard
as I was
I
saying,
heard this.
I find myself in the position of having to defend DEI.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. It's not like they
Yeah,
it's not like they transform or change the structure of the university of how it functions or anything. And it's like and I think I heard this from a white comic. I think it was John Stewart years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when he said something as to okay, people are fighting over DEI and it doesn't even do anything. It's just
right.
language. You're not
Yeah,
changing any structures. You know you're in
right.
trouble when you can't even, you're just fighting over language. That's nothing.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
changing the economic, political, and social structure of anything. And I'm like, this is a white
mhm,
dude who come to that conclusion? A white comic? I'm like,
yeah,
this is some heavy stuff, man. It's like
yeah,
DEI is a scam. It was the least you could do because it's not even
yeah,
changing
yeah,
any structures. It's just having a conversation about stuff you should be doing of treating people of color the way they should be treated. And you got to find some words to make sure you at least have a conversation about it. And I'm like,
right.
I am not going to DEI conversations to make white people feel comfortable about their racism. I am not engaging in that process. Don't call me.
Yeah.
Don't call Dr.
No,
Jackson. Hey, Dr. Jackson, you want to lead this discussion on No, 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 I
yeah,
don't.
yeah,
Unless you're
yeah,
going to change some structures and no, sorry. Not doing it.
yeah. It is truly amazing. So here's where I really want to go, though. In August, the new right wing trustees at the new college, what was known as the new college in Florida,
Yep.
and our buddy Jim Stewart was one of the
Yeah,
trustees.
yeah,
They
yeah,
got bumped
exactly.
off,
Yep.
right? And they brought in the right wingers. Well, in August, they began the process to abolish the 30-year-old gender and women's studies program.
Huh.
Yesterday, the Florida Board of Governors removed sociology from the core curriculum.
Hmm. Huh.
Now,
Huh.
and what I mean by that is that it's no longer this principles of sociology is no longer mandatory for graduation.
Yep. Yep.
Now, we spent
Wow.
a 30-year battle, right, to make
Uh,
Black Studies courses, right, some of them mandatory for graduation.
yep.
Now, we just accomplished this at the University of Illinois about 12, 13 years ago.
Mm.
Been fighting for it since the late 60s, early 70s, right? We finally get it in and what appears to be the thrust in the country is to remove
Hmm.
courses that provide a critical
Yep.
understanding of the society from core curriculum. So, how do we galvanize Black studies to prepare for and to resist and to defeat the initiative to remove us from the core curriculum? Right? Because I got a bunch of students who,
Wow.
when I asked them that first day, why are you here? Well, I got to get my multicultural
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
credit
exactly.
to
Of course.
graduate.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And that ain't just white students.
I know.
I got a bunch of Chinese and
Uh-huh.
Japanese and
Yep.
Latinx students, and as well as Black students who are coming to get their graduation credential,
Yep.
as well as other reasons. But the point is that with the decline in Black student enrollment,
Yep.
with this, the decline in the numbers taking our courses because we don't have the robust enrollment that we had in another historical era.
Yep.
Black studies threatened.
Yeah, probably. But Black studies has always been threatened.
Okay.
The
Our
question
life
is how
as
to
a people
fight
have
it.
always been precarious. Yeah, the
So
question is how to fight.
the question is how to fight it. So, and this is totally speculatory. It's not even based on any sort of hard data to prove that this plan would actually work. Um, but I think one way is to educate folks on allyship and connections that crosses Black studies with other oppressive groups to kind of build coalitions that are solid. But I can't say that necessarily works. I mean, knowing historically those coalitions have been broken down too. I just know it can't be just Black folks fighting for, because we're not at that point of even a quarter of the population of getting together to
Right.
organize something. So we're going to have to figure out some sort of allyship with other groups, what that looks like. It could include the labor movement folks that are outside the university and do the things that Black studies were created to do, which is go into community, organize folks, bring them back on campus, and build these bigger connections between communities that's in the university, outside the community, solidify those and build more allies, doing that back and forth, back and forth. But that takes time. And it's not even to say that would work, but at least it's more
Mhm.
it's more based on the foundation of Black studies that you're supposed to go into the community and have that symbiotic relationship in the community and build them up to defend themselves against encroachment. At least it's more to that foundation. But again, that may not even
Mhm.
work. I don't know. I mean, white supremacy is white supremacy. The vestige of
Oh
white
yeah. Oh
supremacy
yeah.
is not going down. And the Trumpyites are part of that equation. I mean, they're going to do whatever
Oh
it
yeah.
takes. So I don't know, man. I mean, this is at least study history and try to get some ideas of what worked and didn't work. I mean, if it comes to armed self-resistance, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. I mean, it is what it is, though.
Oh well, certainly we either will move in that direction or we will be eliminated by those who have.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um, I want to pose this question to you, right? You have consistently raised the question of the foundation of Black studies and the link between campus and community.
correct.
But you know as well as I do that the departments who persisted in trying to have a link to the community, they didn't get the big Ford money. They didn't get the
Correct.
Spencer money. They didn't get
Correct.
the Mellon money,
Right.
right? That they funded the departments that
Yeah.
wanted nothing to do with the
Yep.
community, particularly the
Yep.
folks you've been talking about, working class
Yep.
Black folk. Nothing to do with
Yep.
that.
Nope. Nope.
So at this moment, this is my vantage point. It looks to me like Black studies as a discipline has been captured by the neocolonialists,
Yeah.
and that NCBS may
Yeah.
represent a vestige of
Yeah.
those who still think of Black studies as education for liberation, but the big Black studies departments
Yeah.
long ago, if they ever did, moved away from that
Yeah.
notion.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, co-opting is being co-opted is real.
Yeah.
It's real. It's not a theory. It's real. Hmm. Yeah, I would agree.
So we got to
Hmm.
figure out how we're gonna fight. You know. Um,
We're gonna have to do it piecemealing. I mean, there's gonna have to be a way to get that community, even with those smaller programs, connected somehow. And that's an elephant in the corner question because I don't I have to spend some time thinking about it.
one of the things I
And
find
it may
shocking,
be
and then go
it may
ahead.
be that next generation that figure that out because it's like I'm not really sure. I mean, I don't know. That's a big question.
Yeah,
Mm.
we're in
Mm.
trouble, but we always take our cuts.
Oh
And
yeah,
whenever you think we're down, we
yeah,
get off the mat. You know what I
true,
mean? And we come back fighting. So,
exactly.
I got faith in that
Yeah,
aspect of what we do.
yeah. And
Um,
historically, it's proven.
yeah. So I
I
want to,
mean, if the system of enslavement was set up from the beginning of this nation to destroy and totally dismantle the internal fortitude and culture of Black people, it failed because we're still here fighting. So that's what I rely on.
and I think that's a very good way to put it. That's right. I think that's a very good way of putting it. Um, so one thing that I continue to be somewhat amazed by, and I know that this, at the end of the day, we can't just focus on intellectuals because it's not intellectuals who will make revolution, right? But there is a role that
Right.
intellectuals have to play, right?
Yep.
Um, but within that arena, it is interesting that I don't believe there has ever been a sit down between the presidents of ASALA, NCBS, the Association of Black Psychologists, the Association of Black Sociologists, the Association of Black Anthropologists, right? The Black social workers. I don't
Right.
believe that even within the realms of academia. Now,
Mm-mm.
and of all of those groups, I think ABPSI, the Association of Black Psychologists, and ASALA, the Association of African Americans for the Study of African American Life and History, we are not just a group of academic intellectuals
Right.
because we have community folks, we have branches in the
Yep.
community that consist of people that are not academic scholars, right?
Right.
But these other groups are they're
Yep.
intellectuals. But there's
Yep.
never been a calling of all of them together,
Nope.
right? Sit down, begin to plot and plan, and take
Mm.
stuff to these politicians. Because you and I both know Black politicians generally don't have an understanding
Right.
of our history or the current situation we're in, and lack a staff that's capable of
Yep.
writing legislation that speaks to the conditions that we are actually in.
Yep.
So it would seem that that's
Or
a
or
role that we
or
should
they
be
have
playing.
or these politicians, Black politicians, have lost their minds. As I flipped through a channel a couple days ago and saw, which I don't know, why I was surprised. Tim Scott
Oh, you saw
kissing
that?
the ring. I'm like, I was
Yeah,
flipping channels and I stopped and I'm like, let me rewind this because I have a DVR and I'm like, I need to go through this
yeah.
slowly and actually understand him losing his mind. I need to understand because I know his story. It's like, when did he lose his mind? It's a different losing mind than what's the doctor that was with Trump before? There was that from Hopkins.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Like
brain
he
surgeon,
got
Ben
he got
Carson.
dismissed. Yeah,
Ben
Ben Carson
Carson.
got
Yeah.
dismissed. It's like did Tim Scott not understand what happened to Carson? Like he got dismissed when he's not like you're gonna get dismissed too, dude. Like what are you doing? You sold your soul that you're gonna be as soon as
Yeah,
you're not
yeah,
useful, you're gonna be dismissed. It's like your soul is that like tangible. You have no soul, dude. So
yeah.
that's
Well,
even more
well, I think
insidious.
he sold whatever was there a long time ago, man. 2 years ago, I wrote a graduate friend, and I this is when Tim Scott came on. It's probably during COVID when I first noticed him, and so I wrote her and I said, "Hey, what do y'all down there think about this Tim Scott fellow?" And so the response came back. She said, Yeah, we think the same thing about Tom Scott that we think about all black Republicans. And I naively wrote back, "Isn't his name Tim?" She responded, "I know,
Yeah.
but
Oh my
this boy had
God.
made that move a minute ago, right? A minute ago."
It's just boggles my mind. I mean, because one of my favorite pastime when I have quote free time is to read biographies of black people. Because I want to know, as you asked me the question, like, what was your formative years like to get you to a certain place? Because usually those formative years will kind of direct you in certain places. And I didn't see Tim Scott's bizarre behavior as a kid. Something translated later
Mm.
that kind of moved him in that direction. And that's why I love reading because I mean the question you asked me
Is it a
is
straight
usually
buyout? I mean, did he? Was it a
I
straight
don't
purchase,
know.
or is there something else in there?
It's like an identity crisis. Like, did you forget you're a black man in the United States? Like, did you like just forget this?
Did he
And
ever
and if
know?
and if you did, how did that happen?
Mm.
I mean, that's talk about critical race theory. Like that would be a piece to kind of uncouple how do people lose their identity that they're black people in the United States? Like, how does that work? Do they get just tired of it? Do they just flip out? Are they on some sort of hallucinate drugs? Like, what the heck is going on in their heads?
You think that class has a role to
Oh,
play
yeah.
in this?
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
It's like you moved up and you thought you were white. It's like, no, you're not. I haven't, like I said, I have not heard one peep out of Ben Carson. Like
No,
it's
no.
not a nothing, not a news conference, not a peep.
But
And
he
my
proves that there's different types of intelligence, doesn't he? Because we can't say he's not intelligent. He's a damn
exactly,
brain surgeon.
yes.
But clearly, he dumb as hell when it comes to race.
And Tim Scott is trying to up the ante.
Yeah. Well, it
So,
could be Herschel Walker. But anyway,
oh
I
man,
want to go to the chats. Before I go to the chat, though, I got to ask you. Yeah, I know Herschel Walker. Man, do you know I wrote a column about Herschel Walker, and I called him a coonish buffoon. And the next thing I knew, some son of a bitch parked in my driveway with their lights off. I was getting death threats, getting hate mail.
what?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's.
Okay.
Do you have any last kind of statement, any announcement before we go to the chat? Concluding thoughts or what have
I
you?
got I got nothing, man. I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning. I'm, I'm running on fumes now, man.
I, brother, I appreciate it, and I know that you must have a big tank because
Oh
you're
man,
still going well. So I'm gonna go to
man.
these to the
Okay.
chat then, right? And so DC Joe Black, and I'm starting at the bottom, working my way up. And if you have questions, this is the moment to put questions in the chat and not just make statements. So DC Joe Black asks, which is worse, them being ignorant of our history and needs versus knowing exactly what they do and don't do? Hard times for sure.
Which is worse? I think they're about the same. I don't think
Why?
either one is worse because it's still
Why?
duplicitous and not doing anything to improve anything. It's to maintain the status quo. Neither option is good. It's just a way to maintain the status quo and do nothing.
Okay. Okay. Two F's suggest that the critique we were having about the current condition of Black Africana studies as anti-colonial studies maybe. And what I take is that she's saying that maybe we need Black Africana studies to evolve into a kind of anti-colonial studies. What do you think about that?
That's a good option. I never thought of that. That's a good idea.
Okay.
But again,
You want to
strictly
flesh it out?
strictly because of my background as a historian, um, it would take some education and some leadership to move in that direction. For folks to immerse themselves in exactly what is colonialism and what is anti-colonialism. And so it could be done. It's just will take an intentional amount of effort to do it. And not to say you shouldn't, but I think that's a good option. Actually, I'm gonna write that down.
Okay.
Make
So
that
now here's my question to
one of
you.
my next books or something.
I want to go back into who you are, right? Your father was a laborer. Your
Yes.
mother had one college course, so you
Yeah. She.
essentially came out of the working class, and you
Yes.
certainly came out of a Black working class city
Correct.
here
Correct.
in Indiana.
Correct.
Do you find that your students have your background, or do they come from the suburbs? Their parents have college degrees and make middle class money, and they live a middle class life, and for the most part, have not been socialized around Black folk.
Well, I'll give you the last part. They have not been socialized around Black folks, but most of them are not middle class. Most of them are I'm talking white students, are first gen, maybe lower, lower, lower class, but not poor.
Hmm.
But they have not been exposed. They live in isolation based on no fault of their own, based on where their parents put them. Um, but yeah, that's what they are. They're mostly first gen, at least at our university. They're first gen, and they're not upper middle
Okay.
class. They're one step away or two steps away of if their parents were laid off, they would hit poverty in probably 6 months.
Okay. I think you can even get that out of the Black middle class, but I would say that at the University of Illinois, we don't get we get very few kids from the South and West Side.
Hmm.
Um, we get like I've had Black students who have family incomes of $400,000.
Oh, we don't get that. Mm-mm.
We largely get middle class kids, and this goes
Okay.
all the way back to a former U of I president when they were first feeling the heat to open the
Mm.
thing up, right? I mean, intense heat. So in I think it was '88, this president said that he was all for bringing Black students to the University of Illinois. He just wanted to ensure that they were just like the white kids,
Of course.
right? So he wanted the same class background, same
Of
values.
course.
Boom. And I think that they've achieved that, right? So I guess where I'm going is this. If Black studies in the future is going to be populated by middle class Black kids, how do you see it making the link to the community? Because what I'm reading from you is that the 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 stream, the air, the blood that will save
Mhm.
Black studies and turn it back to the right course is going to come from the type of people with the background that you had.
Correct. I don't know.
So how's that
I
going to
can't.
happen?
I can't even answer that because I mean, just on a surface level, Northern Kentucky University does not compete with the University of Cincinnati. That's more of the
Yeah.
middle class kids, which is I can get to University of Cincinnati from my university in like 20 minutes or so. Um, and even the Black students we recruit are not necessarily the higher economic realm middle class folks. So I think it depends on locale of your university, of where your Black Studies
Mm,
program is located. So the locale maybe is important to understand what students you're drawing into your sphere of your Black Studies program
mhm,
and what students you're not. I think you can be more intentional of what students you want to pull into these programs. But again, it
mhm,
depends on the larger society of red and blue states and the legacy of white supremacy and manifestation of white supremacy. I mean, white supremacy is, and I tell people all the time, it's not a theory, it's real, man. It's an everyday thing. You have to wake up in the morning
mhm.
and figure out how much of that white supremacy as a person of color you want to suck into your spirit. Because it could change your
Yeah,
psyche like that. And so
yeah. Mhm.
it just depends what's going on in your life. I mean, it's but I think again it
It's
depends, like
pervasive.
I said earlier, it depends on the locale of your university and what type of students you're going to pull into your programs.
Okay.
Because if you're in a working
So,
class, like Gary, Indiana has Indiana
mm,
University Northwest. So I'm assuming, and I haven't checked, of the numbers of folks, and again, they do have a Black Studies program up there. I'm assuming that those folks may be more working class because of
yeah, no,
Gary.
I think you're right about
So
that.
I
I think
think it
locale
depends on the
matters.
look.
Yeah, yeah, I think absolutely it does. 'Cause I'm going
And
back
then
to
the
the chat
leadership.
now.
Okay.
Here's, that too. Here's a well, you respond to the question as you will, right? Someone by the name of Easy D wrote, Eric, why some black women embrace feminism and none of them can explain feminism other than Harriet Tubman. They got Tubman was a feminist. I guess Harriet Wright feminism, it's mindless indoctrination. And having studied with Patricia Hill Collins, I think you're perfectly situated to respond to this backward,
Yeah,
deeply problematic piece of patriarchy.
yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's an indoctrination of people not drilling down on specifics. It's just surface level analysis and grabbing towards stuff that makes them feel comfortable in their situation and not digging deep into a Septima Clark kind of analysis or a Ella Baker type of analysis. They're not digging into that stuff. It's just surface stuff. Well, it's like low hanging fruit, and it's not critical. It's not detailed. It's not researched. It's just surface level stuff. That doesn't make them bad people. It may be they don't even have the skill set to do that kind of analysis. And how do you get them to do that kind of analysis? You move them into these critical thinking components and areas, and you can create what they were doing back in the 60s in the South of creating freedom schools and giving folks skills in freedom schools or in churches organizing freedom schools. I mean, you can find a black church, and I live in a mostly white neighborhood. I can drive 15 minutes and get to a black church, which not to say they're panaceas of everything's going to be fine because you can do critical analysis on black churches, but
Mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
organizational piece is helpful to understand. We have these institutions that are at best not being used and at worst being manipulated by the wrong people. And some of us are old people.
That is true. That is true. But I'm gonna tell you, and from the time when I first got involved in the movement at 14, while there was quote unquote black male leadership, there was always a critical assembly of black women that did the work that kept the organization in
Yep.
existence,
Yep.
right? Um, Over time, more and more of them have risen to the fore.
Yep.
But I don't know how someone can look at the work being done in the Black liberation movement today and raise the question critically of Black feminism and Black womanism because they're on the front lines, they're behind the scenes, they're strategizing, they're
Mhm.
leading, they're doing the grunt work. I mean, at any rate,
But
we got
but the key
we
is
got
but
another
the key
kind of
is
question.
critical.
Go ahead.
It's critical. Critical analysis. That's the key. They're not being critical. But
Yeah.
next question.
Breaking Ground asks, do you think that there is enough study of working class Black histories and struggle in Black studies programs, or Black study framed as such, or Black studies framed as such?
Short answer, no. More detail would be just doing a quick literature review, and I do that periodically to see what's out there in Black labor movement. That's not an area that people want to talk about or even want to focus in on, because in some ways it's more impactful and more empowering to folks, and that's not where people want to go. Who control some of the mass productions of scholarship? They don't want to do that, because it gives them insight into how to be more politically active and be more powerful in what they're doing. But some folks who are in the position of producing scholars, they don't want to do that. Like, why would they do that? But we have to do it as people of color. I mean, I've always, like I said, growing up in that labor movement, I always wanted to understand the how and the why. How and the why. That's usually my first questions.
Right,
How and
right,
why?
right. Yeah, it's certainly. I've got a former PhD student who is now a professor of their own, who's in a labor education program, but there are very few Black folks in labor studies, right? So certainly need to be more there. But we have another question from Pancho McFarland, Africana Studies at Chicago State University, undermined by bourgeois administration, is now combined with history and with no majors, African American male resource no longer funded, all at a public Black institution. Now, I know that Purdue just merged their Black Studies department with Women and Gender,
Gender.
Latin X,
Yep.
and some other things. And this might be a trend.
Oh, it is. It's totally. I mean, that's totally my administrative hat. It's a trend depending on where you sit in your type of university. Is it a flagship, which generally drains all the money from the state? Is it a regional comprehensive, which usually gets the
Mhm.
secondhand money? Is it an
Right,
HBCU, which probably gets no money? So it
right,
depends on
right.
where your university sits, because financially, then you have to figure out how to couple money together to just hold on and maintain of what you have. And they start
Mhm.
slicing stuff. And it's just where you sit in the hierarchy of the university world. I mean, the hardest
Okay.
thing I've done as an administrator is to watch people go over my head and cut faculty of color who are
Mm,
temporary workers at our university. They're the first
mm.
hired and the first fired.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's nothing I can
Uh,
do, even as an administrator. There's that
right, because they're
I can't
temporary.
stop it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can't stop it.
yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. Okay, we got 2 minutes. You got a minute and 30 seconds to respond to this question. DC Joe Black again. But what about the industry that has arisen around DEI? My gym, child school, 6th to 7th grade, and employer are all now have DEI directors, many positions, but no tangible results or appreciation of history. Want to respond to that?
Not really. I don't know the question. The question is what? It was DI good, bad, or
It's
indifferent, or what?
implied. Well, I guess what he's saying is that this has now become an industry,
Oh, it is.
and he
Absolutely.
wants to know whether or not. So let me give you a question. Um, there's a group of right wingers who are taking what has been done by Florida into the corporate world.
Correct.
You want to react to that? And you
I
got
don't know how.
30 seconds.
I don't know how that's going to play out legally, because if you're a company or a business, how legally can you tell somebody what to do with their own business? I don't know how that stands up legally. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I know a few lawyers, like way too many, but I don't know how that would stand up legally.
Okay, great answer. Great answer. All right, my brother, I'm gonna remove you,
Okay.
remove myself, and we're going to play the end.